بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسوله. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we seek refuge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are in need, and we seek refuge and aid only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as to what follows. SubhanAllah, the most amazing thing that the Muslims do not have education or do not know about is their history. And when we talk about the history, we all learn the way in the seerah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the life of the Khulafa, but we tend to forget that Islam had a different history. It had a history in which we have been deprived from. We haven't been taught this history. We haven't been educated about this history. And as if this history has been buried to us, so that the Muslims think to themselves that, you know what, we have absolutely no input, nor have we benefited the modern society of today. Rather, that is not true. We are taught in school history. Those that did not jig and actually attended class would know that you were taught history in school, that subject that was so boring and that subject that we just didn't want and didn't like, but we had to do. It was compulsory. This history, they teach us two types of histories. One is the ancient history. They teach us about the Pharaoh, they teach us about the Egyptians, or whatever happened before the birth of Christ, as they say, Isa alayhi salam. And then they teach you modern history. What happened in World War I, what happened in World War II, and that's it. And we say to ourselves, wow, that's amazing. Wait a minute, what happened to the history in between? What happened to the history that was between these times? The history in which we have been kept from knowing. Why? Is because this is the history of Islam. This is the history of the golden ages of Islam. This is the history where mankind was taken from darkness into light. This is the history that Islam put forth to the world. Maths, language, science, education, medicine, architecture, everything that is seen in our modern way and modern times, subhanAllah, has a basis in Islam. So many aspects of this modern world is based on the efforts of Muslims. Even Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions and those that followed them, and even from the later scholars, the later generations, came inventions, came ideas, came theories in which the modern society that we are based upon today is built upon. Have you ever asked yourself, who was the first to conduct surgery under general anesthetic? Who was the first one? Who was the first man recorded in history to fly? Many of us would say, you know, it was the Wright brothers that made this hang glider, aeroplane, whatever it may be, and they flew 100 meters or so, about 100 years. This is the first thing that comes into our mind, because this is what we've been taught. Who was the first ones to discover, we all have a cup of coffee in the morning. Where did it come from? It's prominent in the Western world. But was it the West that discovered coffee? Who developed the first form of university degrees? You know, was it the West? You know, surprisingly, even we see today, when people that graduate from university, they wear a thobe, they wear a black thobe and a hat with a string. And we look at that, we say, that's very strange. I wonder where that comes from. And we'll touch later where that comes from. It has an Islamic origin, subhanAllah. Or who invented algebra or mathematics or optics, the glasses that we wear or the lenses that we have or the cameras that we have that zoom out and zoom in and all these things. Did Canon make them? No. Did Kodak make them? No. Did OPSM make them and invent them? No. But these are common things that we think. Even bacteria. When many of us, we go to school, the first experiment that most of us do in science is that we boil soup, right? And we put it in 2 flasks. And one of the flasks has a straight glass, and the other one has a curved glass. And then you come back the next day to school, and you find that the flask that had the tube that was straight has bacteria in it. And this is called the broth experiment. And they prove that, look, microbacteria is actually in the air. This is how they prove it. Because it's able to travel down, but through the flask which is curved, the bacteria is unable to travel. And we think to ourselves, no, it is the Western world that has brought this. Little do we know. The toothbrush that we use, was it Colgate that invented that toothbrush? The engine that we drive, was it Holden or Ford that invented that engine? Or even the way that modern hospitals are based on today, with wards, with departments, with free service, was that something in which the Western world gave? No. Most of these, all of these, and even more of these were given by the Muslims to the modern world. Many Islamic scholars contributed their ways, their inventions, their thought, their ideas into this modern world, that some aspects of this whole world is based on their actions. SubhanAllah. Look at surgery, for example. A famous scholar of Al-Andalus, Al-Zahwari, a famous scholar. He is called in the books of the Western encyclopedias the father of modern surgery. Surgical techniques is based on this man, a Muslim. He changed the way, even we all see surgery. When they prepare for surgery, what does it look like? How does it occur to you? Many people comment that it's like they're making wudu. They're putting their hands in and they're putting their hands up from their wrist to their elbow. All these ways was invented by this person. How to prepare yourself for surgery. Why? Because he said that the wudu that we make, it brings the dirt away from the hands, down to the elbows until it comes off. SubhanAllah. How amazing is that? He invented a way in which that when he would do a surgery, he would have to do stitches. But then to take the stitches out, he would have to undo the person again, take the stitches out and stitch him back up. But when you go to a doctor or have a surgery, he says, listen, you've got sutures in there that will dissolve by themselves. You say, well, man, that's amazing. SubhanAllah, 1,000 years ago, this man used the gut lining of sheep as a surgical suture which they would dissolve, SubhanAllah. He's recorded to do the first cesarean. The first cesarean, which is a lifesaver for many women and children these days. And he was a Muslim scholar, a Muslim man, and his books were studied all over the world. But however, how does his image get lost? When his books were translated into Latin and they gave him a Greek name, then he disappeared into the history. The Muslims don't know of him anymore, which is very unfortunate. And he designed many instruments of surgery and techniques of surgery. Even they asked him to build a hospital. What did he do? He got pieces of meat and he placed it across the whole city. The whole of Baghdad was covered in meat. And then he went and he checked which meat was the least decomposed. Because that's the area that has the least bacteria. And he said, this is where the hospital should be built. SubhanAllah. We look at, for example, the flying machine. Many of us would think to ourselves that, you know what, we had no contribution to aviation. Well, before Da Vinci, before a shaitan, he came along, right? And that's who he is, and Muslims should not praise this type of man. He drew a flying machine. So in the West they say the first person to think about flight was a person called Da Vinci. But did you know that Rolls-Royce has even dedicated a car for the first man in recorded history to fly? And he was a Muslim. And he was in the time of Al-Andalus. His name was Abbas ibn Farnas. Even there's an airport in Baghdad which is named after him. But again, Muslims, they're not taught this. They know, no, we can't put a Muslim saying this person contributed to modern aviation. He was the first man to think and design a hang glider and fly. No, we can't reveal that information to the people. We have to make sure that Muslims think that we're done. And we have no contribution whatsoever to modern society. But it's the reality of the situation, and more people are starting to realize that the foundations of their modern world is based on Islam. SubhanAllah. Even he designed a clock that would ring every hour. Abbas ibn Farnas designed a clock that runs on water. This is 1,000 years ago. And so they sent this clock to one of the kings, one of the Western kings, one of the British kings. And so this king said, how is this clock working? So he brought all his men and they started to investigate into this clock. And they said, listen, the only conclusion and the only thing that we can come up with about this clock is there's two demons sitting in it that make it ring every hour. This is how backwards they were. But the Muslims, they had vision. Even the university. Now we went back to when someone graduates, he wears a cap and it has a rope. Very strange looking cap. However, this has an Islamic origin. That when scholars, they would graduate, they'll be given a hat with a string. And they'll be told by their teachers that you were hanged by this hat. Meaning, the knowledge that you gained, you're going to be accountable for what you do with this knowledge. As if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they're saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching and will call you to account with this knowledge that you have brought forth. And the first recorded university, even it mentions in the early times, but the first recorded was around the time on the area of Morocco. Some say Egypt, but we know that the first principle of giving a degree and giving a certification or an ijazah or someone permission, saying to them that you are now qualified to teach, you are now qualified, was based on Islam. Education. Education, which is the most important thing in a society, was built upon Islam, subhanAllah. Optics. Let's talk about another man, Ibn Haytham, again in the time of Andalus. The father of modern science and optics. This is what encyclopedias refer to him as. Do you know glasses? He was the man that invented glasses and lenses. And the West, or the Europeans, they used to think that the way you see is that the light comes from your eye out. Right? Most of us will say, no, we know that light comes from outside in. Back then they believed that light is emitted from the eye out. And he's the one that came with the proof that light enters the eye, subhanAllah. And he also explained the relationship between the eye and the brain. And he also invented the first pinhole camera, in which a large image will go through a small image and exit to another projection on a large image. The modern father of optics and lenses and science. But we never hear his name. There were many other inventions that he also brought to this world. But everything is kept hush, hush. The toothbrush. We know the one in which promoted the toothbrush, none other than Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. Gave to the world, subhanAllah. But then again, the Muslims, they're unaware of that. We mentioned about hospitals. The hospitals that we know of today, come from the area of Egypt in 872 in the Western calendar. SubhanAllah. And even before that, it's mentioned that other hospitals were built again in areas of Syria and Baghdad and so forth, where a patient was brought in, cared for by specialist doctors and released. This was never heard of other than the world of Islam, in the world or the land of La ilaha illallah. So as we can see, that Islam was in the forefront of everything in this world, was in the forefront of knowledge and education, of grammar, of religion, of science, of everything. Even the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ advised to seek cure for a disease, to seek a cure. Muslims were in the forefront. Why? Because their mind was open. They had hidayah, they had light, they had vision. Many Muslims were not uneducated, rather they were educated. And they benefited this ummah, the nation of Muhammad ﷺ. And we were the best of nations. But we've forgotten our past. What do we see today? Muslims leaving schools and not working, or hanging around the streets and hanging around the malls, or lying for Centrelink or to sit on the dole, not completing courses. What happened to perfecting the actions of a Muslim? Not building their skills or on their skills, not living with no goals, no ideas, no hope in their life. Always asking for money, always asking for help, and are able to work and able to do things, however they do not. Being lazy. Muslims that some can't even speak, some can't read, some can't even write. I saw a man, a Muslim, once looking at his phone. I said, "What's wrong with you?" He goes, "Sorry, can you read this message? I can't read." Okay, "Are you serious? You can't read?" He goes, "No, I left and he ate." What do you mean? You can't read? How do you pay your bills? How do you live your life? SubhanAllah. And Muslims, all we hear is getting in trouble in school, getting in trouble in this, getting in trouble in that. SubhanAllah. If we look at the early Muslims, they had skills, they had trades, they had workmanship. Don't let the society around us put us down and make us feel that we have no contribution to society. Rather, us as Muslims, after our rights to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen of Islam, we must support one another, be with one another. We're a community that helps and supports one another. And we need Muslims with skills, with efforts to benefit this ummah. So some advice to the youth: put goals, put aims, and have a fuel of motivation. Have an inspiration. Read the stories of the Sahaba, study Islam. Work towards it, have a balance in your life. Take lessons and advice from your parents, from your mashayikh, from the students of knowledge. Do your research before getting yourself into anything. Always put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Avoid the pathways of haram and corruption. And network with the community. Network with the Muslims, because they are supporting you, they are looking after you. And don't forget who you are. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, you are the best nation, the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ever sent to the people. You are the largest nation to come on the day of judgment, and among the first nation to enter Jannah, and will be the greatest nation to inhabit paradise. So be proud of who you are as a Muslim, and know that you in this world have a right. And this right is to your community, to your brothers, to your sisters, and to yourself. Read your history. Read the ones which shaped history. And know that what Islam gave to this world, this modern world that we live, was everything that is based upon today. The ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It gave light. It gave guidance. It gave Islam to the world. We are the largest family. There is no larger family in this world bigger than the family of Islam. Totaled over 1.5 billion people, over. 1 in every 5 people in this world, if not even more, are Muslims, inshaAllah. So be proud. Because what holds us together is not blood. What holds us together is not relation. What holds us together as one is something that can never break, and that is the promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is La ilaha illallah, the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'd like to thank the brothers and sisters for giving me the opportunity to share this information with you, and this information is available everywhere. So seek this information, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make that easy for us. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.